Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to VoxBox F1 Pod. Today, we're debriefing the Japanese Grand Prix. And if you are watching, my setting looks a little different, and that is because I decided not to cook today, which I know is wild because cooking Asian food of any kind is literally my favorite activity ever. But I literally brainstormed every possible dish I could make for Japan. I wanted to make omurice because that's what Yuki made for Liam last time they were in Japan 6 months ago. So that was what I was gonna do, but then I was like, there's so much moving back and forth, and like I can't be talking and like trying to make this omelet. And really all I could think about was sushi. So I got sushi. If you can see. It's a sakidon with ikura. My favorite. I won't be eating while I talk. In between talking. I made a yuzu limoncello spritz, which is a limoncello spritz with a bit of yuzu juice in it. Bye. And that is because to me that represents everything that Yuki is. We got the yuzu for the Japan, we've got the limoncello for the Italy, and it's just him in a drink, and it's bubbly and light and perfect, just like Yuki. Anyways, I've got my yuzu limoncello spritz, I've got my sakadon, and we're gonna be talking all things Japanese Grand Prix. There were cherry blossoms, there were adorable Japanese babies like everywhere, and there was some really good racing. And we're gonna talk about all of it, but as usual, let's kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap 1 F1 news. So Logan is driving with Alex's repaired chassis. And honestly, I find the whole situation so appalling. Like, yes, okay, I understand in theory and in practice that it would take much longer and way more effort to disassemble the car they just assembled to reassemble it as Logan's original car. And it makes much more sense to reassemble Alex's broken car to be Logan's new car. But it's just like rude. The whole thing just screams disrespect. And like, yes, logistically it makes sense. Yes, we all get it. We all get why they're doing it. We all get it. But it looks terrible. It feels terrible. Like all of this work that James Vowles put in to building Logan up, he just keeps destroying with every new like car that he makeshift builds. Like these cars that they're building is like, in my brain, they're like the Fast and Furious cars that they like put together from junk, except those cars are actually fast. Anyway, I'm still not over it. And like, I keep seeing online people being like, oh, you really thought that the James Vowles that was like, Valtteri is James, was dead? Bitch, please. He can come to the phone right now because he's still alive and well. And the comforting, reassuring, supportive mentor that we all came to love that I really trusted is just gone. And in his place is yet another ruthless team principal. And I think I'm just still processing that. Anyway, Fernando does not have a contract next year. He was asked whether he would go to Mercedes, but he says that they're behind him on track, and so it doesn't feel like that great of an idea, which fair. This is a couple weeks old, but I didn't get a chance to talk about it last episode, but Susie Wolf has filed a criminal complaint against the FIA. She says that there has not been any transparency or accountability in relation to the conduct of the FIA and its personnel in this matter. I feel more than ever it is important to stand up, call out improper behavior, and make sure people are held to account. While some may think silence absolves them from responsibility, it does not. Good for her, honestly. Like, the whole situation was so wild and so bizarrely handled. Like, even though they dropped it, which was great of them, way to go, guys. I just find it weird that the like fervor with which they picked that up does not exist in the Christian Horner situation. I understand they're completely different situations for completely different reasons, but at the end of the day, you know, What's one thing that is very obvious, a difference between the two? Sexism. All right. Next, Max's comments about F1 Academy. All right. So everyone's really quick to jump down Max Verstappen's throat for everything. But what he said about F1 Academy, and he actually, there's a picture of him holding the pole tire for the pole sitter for F1 Academy. So he's supporting, they're all required to support and to some extent, I believe. But what he said about it was, it's good that F1 now pays extra attention to women in motorsport with the F1 Academy. Although I have doubts about how they approach it. The cars they drive are way too slow. If you ever want to get them into F1, it really has to go to a higher level. What do we actually help them with? There is no next step for them now. And like, honestly, I think he made a very valid point. If F1 Academy is being set up with much poorer equipment in a sport where the tools you use are almost of equal importance as the skills of those who like use them, like, this might be niche, but in Ice Princess, do you guys remember that? Where she tried to sabotage her performance by giving her brand new ice skates when it takes like weeks to break in new ice skates, and she was completely bloodied up, and it was like a whole thing. Those were ice skates. This is like a $1 million vehicle, and like it's just so important to the performance of a driver and to their success. And if they're being set up to have cars that are worse than F4 cars, then like how are we being marketed that the next step is F1? Surely they should somehow feed into the feeder system. Are they supposed to be equivalent to F2? Are they F5? Like, how are they fitting in? Like, Max is right. Like, what is the next step for them? Let's say one of them wins and is like the best of the best. Where does she go next? F4? F2? F1? If they're not prepared with the proper equipment, how can we even think that they would succeed in the next step? They need to be trained in the correct equipment, you know? So I love the way Max supports things. It's very calm, it's very chill, laid back, and just like matter of fact. Like, yes, it's great that we have women in motorsport. Shouldn't we actually be helping them? You know, like, attention is great, opportunity is great. There's more to it. Lap 2, off-duty F1. So in Japan, Yuki attended the Formula E race last weekend and reunites with Nick DeVries. It was a very wholesome moment. They looked thrilled to see each other. There was a whole clip of it. They hugged. Nick started gesturing to his chin, and I feel like he was trying to point out that Yuki had grew some facial hair. I don't know. It was very cute. Like, Yuki is really like rolling through teammates, and I just loved to see this moment because the way Drive to Survive portrayed their friendship was that like Nick hated Yuki and that wanted him to die. and he was like, I'm the best. Yuki doesn't even compare. Like, why are we even in the same league? Same with Liam. And they're all friends with Yuki because and Daniel too, like, I feel like maybe tensions were high at the beginning of the year, but like, how do you dislike Yuki Tsunoda? So he swore at you on track. Get over it. I think he said in an interview that the hardest thing he's ever done is to not swear. He's like, it's a part of my soul. People express their anger very differently. Today I got annoyed at work and I did a lap around my living room. Yuki can't do a lap. As a quick side note, in the post-race press conference, they all got asked what they think of Formula E, and Max says that he thinks it's really cool and he has a lot of friends in it, so he keeps track of it. But even though he thinks it's very cool to see a track in the city, he was like, there was like a proper jump. It was like the road like literally ramped up, so all the cars would literally jump up in the air and land. And he goes, I don't know who signed off on that. They clearly were drunk. And all of them, Carlos and Checo, were both saying that like they're really happy that Formula E exists because it gives a lot of talented drivers beyond 20 people the opportunity to race and compete at a very high level. Maybe it's just because I only know Nick, but it felt like they were all talking about Nick because I know Max is friends with him. So it feels like they were talking about Nick, but they probably have other friends. But there was quite a bit of Japan content. Lewis went to Universal Studios with his friends and dressed up as Toad, like from Mario Kart. It was actually one of my favorite outfits of him, which I know sounds stupid, but like it was very on brand for Japan. I really liked it. Like it wasn't just like the head. He wasn't like dressed like in a Halloween, like a Party City Toad costume. It was like designer. It was cool. There was a lot of cherry blossom content. Everyone just staring off into the distance of the cherry blossoms. And this makes me laugh when I think about it. But like the first time I saw, Charles posted a picture of him staring up at the cherry blossoms. And I stared at the picture for like a full 30 seconds and was like, Charles came to UW to look at the cherry blossoms? Why is he here? And if you don't know, UW is University of Washington in Seattle, and they have a lot of cherry blossoms, and everyone always comes down to see the cherry blossoms every season. Obviously, Japan, number one destination for cherry blossoms, followed closely by UW. But literally my first thought was, Charles is in Seattle? And like my brain was not processing. I'm like, do I go to Seattle now? I just didn't know what to do. Also, this didn't really happen in Japan, but I heard about it while they're in Japan, so we're putting it in this section. But George, during the media day, George was asked if he had a chance to talk to Fernando since their incident in Melbourne. And George was like, you're actually not gonna believe it, but we saw each other at home purely coincidentally at a coffee shop. We just bumped into each other. And Max immediately interrupts. He has like zero filter for his like, what's the word? What do people say? For his unhinged thoughts? No, it's not unhinged. For his whatever. Max just fully interrupts without like missing a beat, goes, did you brake test him there? And George doesn't want to laugh. Like, I don't think George wants to. So he looks like he doesn't want to socialize with Max, but he found it so amusing that he just started giggling. He's like he had like the annoyed face, but he couldn't help but laugh. And I love every time Max does a funny. When I was at uni, I had a housemate. Her name was Grace. And every time someone said something funny or made a joke, she'd cackle. She was hard to make laugh, honestly, but she would cackle and she would go, oh, Rochelle made a funny, but in a very heavy northern accent. So it was like Rochelle made a funny. That was so bad. So every time Max makes a funny, he literally like pauses, and then when people start laughing, he like whips around like, yeah, that was pretty good, right, guys? All right. Anyway, I just think it's hilarious how this whole thing unfolded, that they just accidentally ran into each other at a coffee shop. And imagine just being at that coffee shop. Imagine you're just sitting there and you just watch George and Fernando interact for the first time since Melbourne. What a moment. Also, where is this coffee shop? Are their factories closed? Were they in London? Imagine if they were in London and they ran into each other at the same coffee shop. That's bonkers. I have to imagine it was in the suburbs somewhere. I forgot what city they're all in. All right. Next section is just called Chronically Online because I'm chronically online. And this is all stuff from online. So Charles Leclerc is opening an ice cream shop in Milan. I saw an Instagram for it the other day. And it was like weird marketing that they did for it. And I wanted to talk about it. But I forgot to save the link. So I went to go and try and find it. But I forgot the name of the ice cream shop. So I Googled Charles Leclerc ice cream shop. And the first thing that popped up was an article. I'm going to read you the headline. And like, I died. This is the headline. F1's quirkiest star, Charles Leclerc, begins selling ice cream. I'm sorry, quirkiest star? Of all the adjectives on this planet, you went with quirkiest for Charles. Charles is like the least quirky person, and there are about 1,000 other adjectives that you would use to describe him that isn't quirky. You know who's quirky? Valtteri is quirky. Charles is not quirky. The headline killed me. Anyway, the ice cream shop is called Lec, L-E-C, which I guess it's cute because it's like his name and it's kind of sounds like lick, like you lick ice cream. Lec, lick, Leclerc. Maybe it's Leclerc. Yeah, lick. I don't know. I think that was the goal. Anyway, there's nothing inherently wrong with their marketing except like the second post is like like a circle of ice cream swirling like in a tub, and then you swipe and the next slide says, what ice that? I think they're trying to say, what is that? And this might be a classic case of language barriers coming up, because ice and is don't sound the same. Maybe in the accent of the person that designed this it does, but it's kind of weird. Anyway, I should ask my mom to say what ice that, and see if it sounds the same. Maybe it does. Anyway, I'm very excited that Charles is opening his own ice cream shop, and I say that as if I'm in Milan like every other weekend and can just pop in. I cannot. Okay, so the next thing that happened online was, this didn't happen online, so I'll preface with what happened offline. Esteban and Oscar went and did the racing with the like a little motored cars, you know, and they did like a whole segment for it. I don't know who it was for, but like they did it, and then it all got posted online, and Alpine posted it. And on the post, Oscar commented, "Alpine had my permission for this post," which is a callback to when he was a reserve driver for Alpine. They announced that he was going to be replacing Pierre Gasly, and he was like, what the fuck? Alpine, without my permission or consent, has posted whatever his famous tweet was that like the tweet heard round the world. He was basically referencing that, and I thought that was incredible. Again, Oscar's hilarity is reaffirmed in tweets and Instagram comments, and he's just peak comedy. I love Oscar. All right, so the final thing I want to talk about, which was literally one of my favorite things on the entire planet, like top wholesome moments in all my time doing F1, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 3 years. So Alex Albon's grandmother saw Lando Norris at the airport and started shouting at him that she's Alex's grandma and can they get a picture? So they got a picture. Alex shared the photo and the screenshot of the text message conversation and wrote, "Grandma has a new favorite driver, it seems." But the exchange is like, the grandmother sends the picture and goes, "Look who I met at Narita Airport. I just called him and I said, I am Alex's grandmom. Achieve one of my dreams." And then she wrote, "Let Alex know so Lando won't think an old lady just made a claim to take a photo with him." I'm obsessed that like her immediate thought was like, what if he didn't believe me? I need him to know that I am, in fact, Alex Albon's grandmother. I really want to know if Lando just assumed that this lady was telling the truth, or if he thought that it was such a hilarious, unexpected lie that he was like, yeah, I'll take a picture with you. Either way, 10 out of 10 exchange. Again, this shows the gap in the media and the journalism that exists at the paddock, that this was never a follow-up question. Why did no one ask Lando or Alex about this? Or maybe they did and I missed it. But I feel like they didn't because they're all stuffy. All right, moving on, lap 3, trackside at Suzuka. So Oscar turned 23 because he's a literal baby. I loved his post on his grid because it was just a montage of all his cake over the years, and there have been many years, 23. And it reminded me of like back when we had a segment where we rated F1 birthday cakes. This one was a Michael Jordan's basketball jersey because it's 23 and then Oscar is 23. Get it? And he said it was better than his clown cake, which was when he was like 1. But again, there's so, like, if you remember in the days of old, one of my biggest like gripes with team cakes is when it's just pure fondant and like they go like OTT on like the decoration. And like, I just can't tell if the cake is going to taste good, you know? Like there's a fine middle between making a good tasting cake and making it pretty. And I feel like sometimes I struggle to find the balance between the two. Like if you're going to go with beautiful, like the decorations need to be personalized. But you can't be too personalized, and it can't just be like vague. I don't know. If you're going fondant, it needs to be specific. But if you're going like a homemade cake, it still needs to be pretty. It can't just be like a half risen sponge cake. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have a bit of both. Anyway, happy birthday, Oscar. You have so much life left to live. All right. So a big thing to talk about in Japan are the fans. Their costumes and the way they dress up is insane every year. They're so detailed and specific, and their hats, the hats were crazy. Anyway, so during the Media Day press conference, Yuki was asked if he got any good gifts this year, and he said he saw a figurine of himself, and he was like, I saw a really, really mini me with a helmet. And then Max interrupts, and he goes, are you sure it wasn't just you? And Yuki goes, yeah. And then Carlos interrupts, he just looked in the mirror. And Yuki goes, yeah, I just looked in the mirror. It was just a great exchange. Everyone's just giggling because Yuki's so short. And I feel like Max and Carlos, again, are not George's favorite people, but he was sitting there giggling in his like giant white pants. They looked like karate pants, like what you wear to a karate class. Anyway, everyone giggled because Yuki is so short. It's a great joke every time, and they'll never stop making it. So there were a lot of adorable Japanese babies during the red flag and during the race. There was a zoom in on a baby that looked absolutely miserable. And he was wearing an I Love Yuki onesie, and I was literally just obsessed with him. I took so many pictures of his adorable, miserable face and the onesie, and he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, or he didn't want a red flag, or just none of it was sitting right with him. But he loves Yuki, and we all love Yuki. Although his parents might have been projecting. Which, speaking of, during a fan event, George and Lewis are on a stage, and all of a sudden you hear, like, in the loudest possible little voice, this tiny little child go, literally just like shrieking, George, 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 at the top of his damn lungs. It was literally the Charles Leclerc kid in Saudi all over again. And he caught their attention. So they brought the little child and his father up on stage, and the kid is wearing like a button-up short sleeve shirt covered in hearts, and George doing his pose on it. And George is like, should we do the pose? And the kid's father's like, yeah, you should do the pose. And then George and the kid do the pose, and George is like helping him get into formation. And in the picture, you see the kid's dad in the background, and he's just beaming. And then suddenly you clock his outfit, and his outfit is also like a short sleeve button up shirt with just George's face, like wearing headphones and staring off to the distance, plastered on every square footage of that shirt. It's so funny because you like suddenly start to realize that like loving George is like a family hobby. Like they all just sit around together and love George Russell, this like adorable little family in Japan. It's just so funny to me. Like, who would have thought that's where they'd be? I imagine George Russell fans to be like in Oxfordshire, not Suzuka. Anyway, so I saw there's a video of the entire exchange. It's in the show notes. And in the video, you can see that photo that George Russell posted was taken by Lewis Hamilton. So like George and the child are posing for the official F1 camera, and like Lewis comes like bolts off his little stool and like jumps up in front so he can take like gets into full like squat position to take this photo, and he's like grinning from ear to ear. Everyone is grinning from ear to ear. This child was a star of the weekend. I cannot get over him. It was just all very funny. All right, moving on to a slightly sadder topic. So Charles paid tribute to Jules Bianchi with his helmet. The caption on his post was, "A special helmet in memory of a very special person for me." Why am I crying again? 10 years this year since we have lost Jules here in Japan. So many memories together that I'll never ever forget. I miss you, and I'll do everything to bring that helmet to the top step of the podium on Sunday. Charles just always makes me cry. His life is he's had such a series of unfortunate events. It's just heartbreaking. Anyway, thinking about Charles and Jules is so heartbreaking every time. I keep getting TikTok edits. If TikTok is listening to me, stop sending me these edits because they make me sob like a fucking child all day. I do not need to see any more Charles and Jules edits. It breaks my heart. I cannot look at them. Please stop. It's too much emotion for me on a day-to-day basis. All right, moving on to the national anthem. The way this is set up, I feel like Yuki, I don't know if I was misunderstanding. It was 10 p.m. at night. I was like half asleep, which shows you how exciting my life is on a Saturday night. Anyway, Yuki was like, I think pushed up to the front ahead of all the other drivers with his little child during the national anthem. It was very weird. But like one of the things I noted, and Ted Kravitz, I want to say Ted Cruz, I don't know why, but Ted Kravitz makes a note of this later. This is like the most polite crowd in like the history of F1. But I think this is the first time, and I don't know if I've just not paid attention before, but I think this is the first time where I saw just like, as soon as the national anthem started, just the immediate removal of hats. Like it almost looked edited, like the way like all the hats came off unanimously across the grandstands. And then as soon as the national anthem ended, the hats like in sync all went back on their heads. I don't think I've seen that in any other race, unless I just wasn't paying attention. But I just thought, again, polite, respectful crowd. I do remember that one clip of Max telling his little child to remove his hat during the national anthem. So I know the drivers do it. I've just never seen such like a synchronized motion from the entire crowd. One more thing to know about the pre-race everything. They zoomed in on Lando preparing for the race, and he was putting his music in, and he uses wired earbuds. Like, what is ex-DJ Lando Norris doing with wired earbuds? Get yourself some Bluetooth headphones, you weirdo. Also, you're like 23. Your generation does not know what wired earbuds are. Anyway, on that note, that concludes the digital warm-up. On to the race ride. We're in Japan during the season of the cherry blossoms, so Japanese fans are polite, creative, and totally awesome. Like George Russell did his pose with the cutest little fan. Who knew George's biggest stan would be a baby from Japan? Speaking of little Japanese cuties, let's give it up for Yuki, a champion of stomachs and hearts alike. We'll hear Danny win the #1 guy on the team fight. Not even a lap after lights went out and away they all went, we got our answer, which was Danny no longer going full send. A pure racing incident resulted in Alex and Daniel in the wall and out of the race. It's a red flag. Lol, fingers crossed Logan won't once again be displaced. Once we're back on track, we say bye-bye to Max. Oh, by the way, there's one more thing that's making this race a lot less duller. The weather is unexpectedly toasty, which makes this strategy technicolor. Everyone is on different tires and planning different numbers of stops. Let's shout out Charles, who came into the pit lane just once to box. You know, it's crazy. We actually got some racy racing, fun overtakes, a clogged pit lane, and Lance's voice cracked, which was amazing. So despite having the same result as usual, Max, Checo, and Carlos as our top 3, it's about the journey, not the destination, and I will take that as a victory. And of course, let's not forget our hero of the day, Tsunoda Yuki, who brought his team into the points in his home race of Suzuki. And with that, we bid sayonara to the Japan GP. Next is China, where we get our first sprint. Whee! Okay, on to analysis. So in quali, Logan crashed the car in FP1, which they couldn't repair in time for FP3, because I think FP2 was missed, or maybe it was the other way around. One of the FPs was missed. So Logan didn't get to compete in the last one. The jokes that came out about him using Alex's car now were hilarious. Just like, honestly, Williams is never going to live this down. Ever. An exciting moment in quali is when Daniel finally performs relatively well and almost makes it into Q3, but then is knocked out by Yuki. Lando also has casually performed so well, not also because Daniel didn't, but Lando performed so well he got into P3. So way to go, Lando. He was like above third position at one point, and when he got knocked down to third, one of the commentators goes, "And Norris will be ruining that sector that was not as mighty as what he has managed before." It's just the most British sentence. It sounds almost weird in an American accent. Like the way they phrase their statements, very British. Which makes sense because they're British. And in the post-quali conference, this made me laugh. Checo is asked why he's feeling more comfortable in the car. And he said, as Carlos would say, stop inventing. Carlos says stop inventing a lot. There was also a moment when Charles complained over his radio because he didn't understand what was happening, why things were going so badly. And people started calling him like emotional and like over the top and like all of these things. And like the way Charles is treated for the way he expresses his emotions is the way women are treated for expressing their emotions. Because first they say he's not assertive enough and he needs to be more dominant and tell the team what's what. And then he complains and they're like, why is he being so emotional? Can he just calm down? Leave the man alone. Anyway, the starting grid for the race is as follows. Max, Checo, Lando, Carlos, Alonso, Piastri, Lewis, Charles, George, Yuki, Daniel, Nico, Valtteri, Alex, Ocon, Stroll, Gasly, Kevin, Logan, and Guan Yu, Joe Guan Yu, and Guan Yu, and Joe. All right, moving on to the race. So before we even had a chance to start, like literally in turn 2 of lap 1, 2 cars are out before they like even started turning into turn 2, and it's Danny and Alex. Alex was 3 places behind. Daniel popped out almost immediately out of the car. We get a bit of a delayed radio from Alex saying I'm okay, and I think he needed help getting out of the car. Upon review, it was clearly a racing incident. Whatever happened, it wasn't either of their faults. But what made me laugh was that as soon as Alex's I'm okay radio played, the commentator goes, but is the chassis okay? Like their concern with the chassis was comical. Like everyone needs to calm down. There was this massive crash 2 seconds ago. Let's worry about the chassis in 5 minutes. Okay? The bigger concern is the chassis okay? The bigger concern is, will Logan now get out of his car and give it to Alex? Lol, during the red flag, when they all, because a red flag came out for this situation. And the joke online was Logan better stay in his car this entire red flag, like just to be safe. And then they don't just pop Alex into his car. Again, Williams will never live this down. Do you have to say that it must be so annoying to like start doing your job and immediately get stopped like as you're like mid-movement, you know, like you're like, it's like starting to jump and being told to stop, and then you have to like get out, put on your baseball hat instead of your helmet and like go talk to your engineers like you just got into the mode. It must be so annoying. Anyway, they started replaying as they do during red flags. They have nothing else to do, so they replay all the radios. It was very sweet to hear how I need to stop crying. It was very sweet to hear how almost every driver, their immediate question was, is everyone okay? Charles did, and this is very sensitive for him on this particular track. Yuki asked if they were okay. My favorite, are they okay? One came from Max, because he went, are they okay? And GP responds, yes, Daniel is out of the car. Maybe Max wanted to know about Alex too. Where was the Alex update? GP was just like, oh, he probably only cares about Daniel. Let me just update him on Daniel. Another funny thing that happened during this was they showed everyone back at the garages. Daniel was back and like reviewing with his engineers and staring at the screen, and it's like zoomed into his face, and then the cameraman pans out and you just see Liam Lawson standing right behind him, like watching the same screen. And the memes are just never gonna end. Again, like some people will just be mocked forever, and Liam Lawson like standing behind Daniel like, That wasn't the face he was making, but that was the vibe we were all getting. That's the vibe of the memes. It's just like, can I go? Is it my turn? Also, I just don't know what this bad luck is for Williams. Just like, what is happening to them? What is happening to Daniel? Like, all of this is just so wild to me. Anyway, at the restart, it was a standing start, but with a new order because they had gone a full sector. So the FIA was able to clock a new order. So it was any overtakes that happened, qualified. At the restart, like, Max had a decent start, but the only one I noticed was Yuki, who like flew the fuck forward to the point where I was like, is that legal? Like, he just lunged forward. And then, sorry, I'm reading my race notes and I just have one. It was like 11 at night at this point. One of my notes is, great news, guys. We've made it past turn 2. That was great news at the time. But a funny radio that happened around lap 4, just like right after the restart, was Esteban going on and saying, Pierre has hit me in the side. Let me know if it's okay. And as I heard that, again, middle of the night, I was like, is he asking if it's okay that Pierre hit him? But now I realize he's asking if the side of his car is okay and if he can continue forward. Which, speaking of, sorry, I'm gonna skip to radios really quickly. There were 2 funny radios. The second one was also Esteban's radio, where his engineer goes, okay, Esteban, we need you to really push. And then Esteban responds, I am pushing. He was pushing. And then the second radio, it's like, you really have to hear it to believe it sort of situation. Let me just play it. It was Lance's towards the end, and his voice cracked to the point where, like, I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like it. He was complaining that how different his car is on the straight, and from what I understood, the setup of his car was more for racing, and the setup of Fernando's car was more for qualifying, so he was much faster on the straights, and so I assume that's what he was complaining about. But that voice crack will ring in my head until the end of time. Speaking of voice crack, though, Lance showed up to. I know what he looked like now. This has been bothering me for like 3 days. Lance showed up, he's shaven, whatever the hell was on his face. His hair is like Carlos hair. And I just realized what he looks like. He looks like Prince Charming from Shrek, but darker. He's almost like Prince Charming meets human version of Shrek. That's what he was. Yeah. It's a swoopy hair. Anyway, about lap 15-ish, almost mid-race, I would say, Joe gets brought in for literally the longest pit stop of Kick Sauber's life. I don't know if that's true. I just said that. They have a lot of really long pit stops, but they ended up retiring the car because of gearbox issues. So poor, by the way, look at that. How did he even get that there? I've been like racking my brain to figure out what I ran into that would cause that. That's crazy. Anyway, Zhou Guanyu retired, and I just have fingers crossed that he does not have the same fate in China, because oh, wow, what a moment to have a Chinese driver at our first race back in China in years. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for the food. I hope I don't get overwhelmed and not do anything like this week. I have some ideas. The problem is I never know when to stop. So like when I cook Chinese food, it looks like someone ransacked my home and destroyed it from the inside out. The food's delicious, but it's effort. Anyway, still brainstorming. If you have ideas for what I should make for the Chinese Grand Prix, tell me, because I'm just overwhelmed with ideas. Anyway, moving on. We had some amazing overtakes this race, which is crazy because the cars are too big to overtake, really, particularly at this track. So no one was really expecting overtakes. And yet, I thought it was really funny. Lando had a pretty good race despite only being able to finish P5. There was a moment where he was able to overtake Lewis around the outside, which was a great moment, but I thought it was really funny because he was chasing Lewis for a couple of laps, and it gave me flashbacks to when Oscar was chasing Lewis for like 55 laps. I think that was Oscar's most infuriating moment of his entire life. Oscar, by the way, also had a very stressful moment towards the end of the race because he was like chasing George down. George kept trying to overtake Oscar and it felt like it was up to the last lap. And at the very last lap, Oscar like backed out and let George overtake him. And everyone keeps joking it's because like, we all know what George is capable of in the last lap of a race, God forbid. And Oscar was just like not fucking with that today. I don't know if that's what happened, but I like that narrative. There were just like a lot of great overtakes. Carlos had a very bold overtake on Lewis, where they almost tapped and then he overtook him. Even Max was like, during the cooldown room. Checo had some great corner overtakes. He loves a corner overtake. He did it on Lewis. He did it on George. He was just having a great time. But then he was up ahead and having like a similar race to Max. But it was nice to see Checo eat. Nope, that's not the way you use that. It was nice to see Checo cook, not eat, cook. But my favorite all-time overtake of this race was Yuki overtaking Nico Hülkenberg. He literally got a standing ovation. But like, I feel like it was a standing ovation that like you see like, you know, like at a symphony where you just like a very polite standing ovation. That's what he got. I love the Japanese crowd so much. Okay, so big thing this race that we need to talk about. There's two things that were impacting the strategy. One, pit stops in Japan are not particularly straightforward because the brakes are quite cold and the pit lane is downhill. So there's a few things working against you. But despite all that, Kick Sauber actually had one good pit stop with Valtteri, which was a miracle for all of them involved. So people managed, obviously, there were some very fast pit stops. But my point is like the potential issues with a pit stop certainly put people at pause as to how many times they should pit. The second thing that was influencing strategy was that it was unexpectedly hot in Japan. So all the planned strategy has gone out the window. They have no idea really what's happening. It's basically as hot now in April as it is when they compete there in like September, which is crazy. But basically everyone was on different strategies. Some people were on a one stop, others on a two stop. The only person that successfully seemed to do a one stop was Charles, who I will talk about in a moment. There were other people who attempted a one stop. The Mercedes attempted a one stop and failed tragically at it. But yes, let's move on to Ferrari and Charles's performance. So Charles was put on a one stop strategy. Carlos was put on a two stop strategy. So there's a lot of Charles girlies on TikTok, and I don't know if it's just Charles girlies. I think it might be a lot of Charles fans who think that Carlos was favored by strategy during today's race. I don't think that's necessarily true. Both of them, Ferrari didn't fuck up strategy. Let's just say that. Also, Ferrari number 2 wasn't indecisive, which I know is a very difficult trait to overcome, so kudos to them. But like, they were very committed to the strategies they put in place. There was no 1 second, we were checking. They didn't check anything because they were committed. Charles was doing one strategy, Carlos was doing 2. And both of the drivers were committed to this as well. Also, both drivers were driving exceptionally well. Both drivers did amazing. No one was driving better or worse than the other. You can make arguments, one's probably faster than the other one's probably fast. That's because they're both driving very fast and very well. So like, you could make infinite arguments, well, like maybe if this and this and this. No, like I don't think anyone was favored. I think the biggest iffy moment was when Charles was told that his race is with Lando Norris and to not fight Carlos too hard. I don't think that made a difference for how Charles battled with Carlos. But I also think it's super weird that they said your battle is with Lando Norris, because Lando was not close enough for that to be Charles's battle. His battle was with Carlos, but I guess they also don't want to say your battle's with your teammate, so they said Lando. I don't know, it was very weird. But I do think it was inevitable that Carlos was going to overtake Charles. And that was just luck. I think that was just the way like things unfolded, you know? And like, this is the one thing I don't understand about Ferrari fans, and particularly fans of Charles and Carlos, that no one can seem to figure out how to be happy for them at the same time. When Carlos was winning last week, everyone was saying, well, see, Ferrari made a mistake. They should have dumped Charles. And then this week they're saying, well, Charles was clearly faster than Carlos, so why are they favoring Carlos? They dumped him. Both can be good. In fact, both are good. That's why they were always one of my favorite teams, because they seemed so equally matched in different, they both had their strong suits, you know, like Carlos is very strategic and smart the way he approaches his driving, and Charles is just very, very fast. And together they make like a very good team because they're almost evenly matched. Why are we pitting them against each other? Why can only one succeed and the other one just combusts? Like, we can be happy for both. It's not one or the other. I just don't understand. One of them doesn't have to suck while the other one is doing well. You know, they can both be doing well. Anyway, their strategy was fine. They both maximized their respective strategies. They both performed at the top level for themselves. 10 out of 10. No one deserved anything over the other. People are dramatic. Other highlights, towards the end, this was right before George overtook Oscar. Oscar was behind Fernando, and it seemed that Fernando was trying to pull a Carlos Sainz. It was literally like, it seemed that Fernando was trying to do the Carlos, like the move from Singapore, where he was like towing Oscar to benefit him, but also to keep the Mercedes at bay. Poor George is probably getting PTSD. He was asked about this after the race to confirm whether that's in fact what he was doing. And his response was, I can't say anything about this because the FIA might disqualify me completely. Always digging. He's always sassing someone. One more thing I want to talk about is Yuki's performance. He did so well all weekend. In fact, he's been doing well all season. Actually, he's been doing well even since like the end of last season. Like, he's been consistent and calm performing. Yes, he had that little outburst at the beginning of the year, but I'm choosing to move past that. I think he is a leader for the team, and I don't understand why people say he's not. I also don't understand why he's never in the discourse about who will take the Red Bull seat, besides the fact that I think Checo should just keep it. I just don't understand, like, people are talking about how if Daniel performs well, he can move on to Red Bull. If Liam takes over Daniel's spot and then performs well, he can move on to Red Bull. The statement is never Yuki can move on to Red Bull, because if you look at it, he's outperformed his last two teammates. He's taken control of the team. He's been good. He's been consistent. He's been P11 basically every single race and above. Like, all the points they have are due to him for the last like season and a half, you know? Anyway, he finished P10 in Japan, which means he earned a point for his team and his first point in Japan. And I think he's the second Japanese driver to earn a point since like some man at some point a long time ago. That was great stat. You're welcome. Also, there was this one point in time, like towards the beginning of the race, where Lewis radioed in and was like, should I let George pass? And then they decided that he should in fact let George pass. And I just think it's funny because he like literally does not give a fuck. In the media pen after the race, he was asked if he's excited to see Ferrari doing so well. And his response was like, do you not have any better questions? And then he literally just walked away. Bro needs to chill. Like, I love this DGAF attitude, but like, for that question, I think that's a fine question. Let me clarify. I think it's a fine question as far as sports questions go. Most of them suck ass. Like, the standard is like a below average question. So in that case, it was fine. Like, not worth walking out of the room for. Anyway, moving on to post-race, there was one moment that was so wholesome, was Checo and Max drove side by side after getting P1, P2. And Yuki was right in between them because it was his home race. So they all drove in formation down the track and everyone cheered for them politely, of course. And it was just so cute. I'm so glad they included Yuki in that. All right. More wholesome baby moments. This time it's not a Japanese baby. Penelope was here as well. And everything about P and Max just warms my heart. When he weighs himself, puts on his little hat, and then he goes over to hug everyone again. And he like literally goes to hug her first. Her arms are outstretched and they like, it's just so cute. She's so happy for him. And then when they're on the podium doing the national anthem is ringing out over the entire circuit. And you just hear, Max, Max, Max! And she's like waving her little arms so frantically. And you can see he's being respectful of the anthem, but he's like smiling because it's so cute. He can't wave back at her, but he's smiling. Love it. Also very cute at the end, in the media pen, he was asked, I think by a Dutch outlet, what it was like to have P here. And he was like, I'm so happy she got to see me win because Kelly and I were worried she'd think she was bad luck. So I'm glad she saw me on the podium so that she didn't think she was bad luck. Also in the cool down room, one of my favorite things is that we're back to the Max Verstappen podcast. And like literally it was pure debrief and it was incredible. When they were drinking their waters, Checo immediately stands there with his hands on his hips in the most dad pose ever. And the clip on the screen was, I think it was Charles doing the one stop. And he's talking to Carlos and he's like, Charles did good today, huh? And Carlos was like, yup. And then they sit down. Carlos and Max sit down, but Checo remains standing, his hands still on his hips. And he's just like rocking back and forth. And he's like, yep. And just like commenting on the race. And I just loved that it was just pure debriefing in there. They discussed all the big moments and it was just great. I love it when they do that. In the post-race press conference, Max was asked something about Toto saying that no one's going to be able to catch him this season. And Max goes, wow, Toto's being like so nice to me. Giggle hair flip. Toto's got him blushing, but he's right. Like, why? Toto is like really on a Max like loving streak. It's very weird. They got asked the most bizarre fucking question. This man who sounds like the guy who did the question for you. 20 years ago, someone said that the controls could be operated by a monkey. Therefore, story. So it was like a 20-minute long question, and Charles looked literally baffled. He was like, it was great. But anyway, the question was, Jules Bianchi died here. Do you ever have time to think how lucky you are not to be dead? That was a paraphrase, but that's essentially what this man asked. And Max goes, I'd rather not think about those things. And then he goes, yeah, it's dangerous, but I could also break my neck showering. Fair. Carlos says he doesn't like to think about danger. He did say that when he was biking the track walk, he always stops at the Jules corner for a few minutes to reflect and to remember Jules, which is also very sweet. And I think it's extra personal to him now because he's Charles's teammate. God, the Jules thing is so sad. Anyway, at the end, the same guy who asks if they think about danger all the time was like, speaking of danger, even though it was like 10 minutes after the last question, but he was like, who is in more danger, you or your dad to rally? Also, just like this dog, is this man okay? What is this line of questioning about danger? Does he have nothing positive to ask? Anyway, Carlos says he definitely feels more in danger for his dad than he does for himself. He's like, also my father is 60. He's had enough risks and rallying is not safe. He's like, I keep telling him to stay at home, play golf, spend time with my mom. And Max immediately interjects again with his with just immediate thoughts just spilling out. He goes, maybe your mom is happy for him to go. And Checo's like, yeah, your mom's like, please go. Okay. Carlos kind of laughs and he's like, I think it's just better for my dad to get everything out of his system for a couple months of the year and then come home. Max says that when he sees his father's onboards, because his father rallies now, he says, when I see my dad's onboards, I definitely think he's in more danger than me. And then Carlos goes, you know, a couple weeks ago, like in Bahrain, your dad was showing my dad his like incidents. So now they're like sharing their moments with each other. Like, what do you think? And then they like exchange pace notes or whatever. I don't know what a pace note is. And Max, I guess it's notes on their pace. And Max says, my dad normally likes to blame everything on his pace notes. But yeah, Max says he has a lot of respect for people who rally, but he prefers F1 because of the trees. He says that the F1 track is designed to withstand impact, but trees don't move. True. So they have this whole conversation about their fathers and rallying. And Checo just goes, don't worry, guys. My dad's a politician, so he's in more danger for sure. And And everyone just starts laughing because it's like, why is your father a politician? And also, lol. Also, imagine Checo's father rallying. Like, imagine him as any sort of motorsport driver. It makes me laugh. All right, so the driver of the day was Charles. Very well deserved, very well earned. I just want him to get a streak of good luck. You know, like, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of all of this. P4 is great. Driver of the day is great. He drove wonderfully. I need him to have some good luck to match his skills and what he deserves, you know? And the dick in the box is whatever witch has put a curse on the House of Williams and Daniel Ricciardo. Like, what is happening? Is it the Monaco witch? Is it another witch? I don't understand what is going on at Williams. They have just had catastrophic luck over the last few races. Just, they keep crashing. Also, remember the first race, the wheels, the steering wheel was doing like things on its own. Like, it would just switch modes on its own. That's witch shit. That's witchcraft, I'm telling you. And Daniel Ricciardo might just be past his prime, which no one wants to admit, believe, or want for him. But like, what is happening? The only other plausible explanation is witchcraft. So dick in the box is witchcraft. All right, so the results of the race are Max, Checo, Carlos, Charles, Lando, Fernando, George, Oscar, Lewis, Yuki, Nico, Lance, Kevin, Valtteri, Esteban, Pierre, and Logan. And there were 3 DNFs, Guan Yu, Daniel, and Alex. The current standings are Max with 77 points, Checo with 64, Charles with 59, Carlos with 55. Hey, that's his number. Lando with 37, Oscar with 32, George with 24, Fernando with 24, Lewis with 10, Lance with 9. Lewis is 1 point ahead than Lance in the Drivers' Championship. That's crazy. The Constructors is Red Bull with 141, Ferrari with 120, McLaren with 69, Mercedes with 34, Aston with 33, RB with 7, Haas with 4, Williams with 0, Kick Sauber with 0, Alpine with 0. They're like last. Like, only so much longer will Travis Kelce wear his Alpine cap in public. They need to fix some shit. I bet Otmar feels really smug, but obviously they're not feeling because he's gone. I don't know what is happening over at Alpine. Anyways, that's it for the Japanese Grand Prix. Next up is the Chinese Grand Prix in just a couple of weeks. Literally cannot wait to cook. Cannot wait. Again, if you have any ideas, inspiration, thoughts on what I should cook, let me know, because I have about 800 meals in my head right now. Also, if you could, I would very much appreciate it if you subscribe, review, and even share with any potential boxes. And always DM me your email or email me your thoughts, ideas, questions. And in the meantime, follow me at BoxBoxF1Pod to keep up with all things in between races, because I share a lot on there as things come out. Anyway, see you soon in China. Box.